You following what's happening in Thailand?
Some kids stuck in a cave.
Yeah, you should be able to hear me now. Okay, can people hear me? Let me know. I think that that's detecting me now. I don't know what. Some of this technology, it stuffs up a little. So, in talking about the caretaker mode and what it's supposed to do, um, it's really, really concerning that it's not taken as seriously as what we should. I'm going to bring that back up because I think that is a super big deal. It basically meant that there was like, they called them the $600,000 an hour men and women. That's how much taxpayers the Morrison government lavished on grants during the 6-week long election campaign. The deal is that you're not supposed to be. Oh, thank you. You're not. Thank you for letting me know you can finally hear me. It's probably driven away people. Um. So I'm wondering what this is going to mean later as a result of this. Can the money be retrieved back? Will ICAC investigate what happens in caretaker mode? Will there be a parliamentary inquiry making sure laws around caretaker mode are now made and it's not just what you do as a known thing to do to not break the caretaker mode rules? So there would be consequences for this. They're talking about a lot of money here. The way Michael West describes it was $600,000 an hour. They were just screaming out the door to go and grab. That's taxpayers' money. You couldn't do this in any industry ever. There is never an industry that I know of that you could just go, hey, I'm about to leave this company and go and do another private entity. I want to funnel so much money out of here for me and my buddies to get a good job and be set up for life. I don't really know the purview of what ICAC's going to look like. But if it doesn't include stuff like this, I'm really going to be disappointed with it. Now, so far, what I've heard about what ICAC will look like isn't making me feel great right now. But this is because it's just rumor. MWM investigation reveals that during the 2022 election, the Morrison government approved hundreds of grants that will appear to be well outside the boundaries of governing process that the major parties have observed over 7 decades. See, now that's what makes that so disturbing, is that it's like a Norman convention, not a law. If you have a look for the US is having the same issue, like, what did Trump do? You know, what were they running off with? And I think Britain's going to have that same issue too when Boris Johnson and his cronies get out. We're now in a time where it's grab whatever you can, fix up your buddies, and walk out the door and pretend like you were on the right side of history here. And because of a complicit media like Fox News and the Murdoch empire, it has turned into this take anything that's not nailed down sort of scenario. Now, I'm not saying that past governments haven't had an issue with rorting. I'm saying this particular government has a terrible, terrible history of just doing terrible things. This Morrison government had the same issues as the Trump White House. Now, one would assume that the hat trick of all that Rupert Murdoch put in place, that Boris Johnson would have a similar issue. My money's on that. So if you're not too afraid to step up, Tories, show us the receipts. Because now we know Trump did it, Morrison did it. Let's see what Bojo has. Because these aren't things that should be considered normal in government. The analysis views grants through the lens of the caretaker conventions. During the 40 days of caretaker, over 300,000 grants were approved to test the compliance with the caretaker conventions. The following questions need to be asked about the grant. Necessary, or could they have waited until after the election? Align with supportive of both party policies, binding the incoming government to programs and policies of the decisions of the incumbent. Now, something that's super interesting about this is that I've seen this on a state level, not on a federal before. When the Newman government was leaving here in Queensland, they were like signing up for this Adani thing, and they were doing lots and lots of things that broke these conventions, which is why I wanted to say that if you're going to give Conservatives a run anywhere, you need to be checking that A, they didn't cook the books, B, they didn't do something for their buddies, and C, you need to make sure that they've left a place in a better position than what they found it, and typically they don't. It's I don't know why people still vote Conservative. That's the thing that confuses me. Like, I get that the scope of the media plays a major role in that, but this also, this also creates a moment where you need to actively close your eyes and not see what's going on as well. Like, you need to pretend like these things cannot be seen by anyone for this to be, like, ignored. The answers to the questions that were asked of both individual category and wide program grants leave us with the conclusion that the coalition gave little of any concern to the compliance of caretaker conventions. Again, this cannot be a convention any longer. We need to talk about it like it's something that should never have been allowed to happen. And why it needs to be discussed like that is because we're in a position where this was the worst thing that you could possibly do. And which is going to bring me into my next thing. As we talk about, I should be glad if you would note that while it's continuing to take whatever action you deem necessary in connection with the ordinary mission of your department, that you should not make decisions on matters of policy in those contentious nature without first referring to the matter of myself. In his instructions to the ministers prior to the 1951 election, said the president for now what we call caretaker conventions. That's the thing. These are older men that sort of had a bit of honour about them. These newer, crazy liberals do not have that. I want to say that they were like the puppy versions of the Republicans in America, because they use the same sort of rhetoric and justification and then go, oh, but I just didn't know. And you can't feign ignorance when it's this big. No important new initiatives can be taken, and no appointment to high office made in government to the period immediately prior to a general election for the House of Representatives unless it can be publicly justified in the national interest. Now, that means that we all should be able to look at it. They kind of did this secret squirrel thing, which is super disturbing. But I don't want to end that story there, because I believe that this next one kind of dovetails that same idea. So it's a boys' club. A report lifts the lid on sexism, bullying and abuse in New South Wales Parliament. Now, the reason that this dovetails into it is because that's where a lot of these Conservatives sort of are flying from. I mean, I want to say that they're all over the country, but New South Wales sort of seems to be this very unfitting government that's doing whatever it can to burn down the house and then pretend like they didn't do it. And their defences are a little bit insane, which is why I think that we're going to have a crazy time in discussing what happens next. with these sorts of deals and misgivings that they've done. A confidential interview with staff of the New South Wales Parliament have lifted the lid on what reports have described as a boozy, predatory boys' club. Almost 450 working at the Parliament were interviewed as a part of the review of former Sex Discrimination Commissioner Elizabeth Broderick. The report reveals just how the office of certain MPs and ministers are known to be hotspots, ruled by aggressive and abusive elected ministers bully, micromanage, and gaslight staff with devastating consequences. Here is just some of the detailed findings of that report. Here's the thing. These reports are great and they expose a lot. But what changes as a result of these reports? I see a report about a report and then nothing actually happens. Like, for instance, there were many over the nearly 10 years of the LNP government. And I honestly did not see anything that looked like it was going to be that did something big. Hold on. What we're going to do is we're going to break down just how incredibly terrible this whole thing was turned out. Some of the comments described in the sexist culture pervading the Parliament, where MPs were heard making lewd comments about female colleagues and staff. It's a bit of a boys' club. There's sexting in the Parliament, one staff member said. Conversations from affront junior members of the staff with staff members that the MPs would like to have sex with. It's like a locker room talk. I was shocked. Now remember that the LNP had an issue with the prayer room. Now there's that's going to come out. There is a lot that's going to be like, there's a lot of filth. And I'm not saying that it's just been over this time. I think it's always been there. And I don't care on which side this is uncovered. This has got to stop. Like this has to stop yesterday. Another woman surveyed said that there was a power imbalance and it was a commonplace for MPs to use their position to manipulate abusing young staff. It's very normalised, the chief of staff sleeping with junior staff. Now, that's a power dynamic. If you're a boss and you like a staff that's underneath you, and you start sleeping with that staff, whether you're a man or a woman, it's impossible for that staff member to say no. Because if they say no to you, suddenly you've got this egotistical view, typically, that the rejection is bad and it's, the promotion won't be really coming. There's a lot of things that can happen as a result. It just makes for a messy workplace. So typically workplaces, you don't commingle in this sense. And a lot of workplaces have a policy around this. It's strange that politics seems to be the cesspool of a lot of this sort of stuff. So what's going to end up happening here is not great. I did observe the cohesion that there was absolutely taking advantage. It felt like the 1970s, rich white old men employing these beautiful young women in their 20s. Another respondent said some MPs only hired females who were good looking and under a certain age. Now that's gross, because now the power dynamic is you've got this kid in their 20s, and yes, they're kids. You can call them after 18 adults, but really, I don't think you're fully developed as an adult until you're 25. There is a lot of discussion about what happens to a young person's brain. So their decision making isn't too flash either. Some of them are great at it, but then there's some others that struggle with knowing how to deal in this sort of stuff, particularly if it's their first job. And this is the first time they're encountering, sexual harassment or anything like that. This is a really big and frightening time. And typically it was deemed as, don't say anything because now they're going to blackball you on all these other jobs. It seems to be an approach to increase your chances of sex by hiring the right stock. One woman described how an MP she worked for would remark on the appearance of the women in the office. Some days you'd walk into the office and make a comment that was inappropriate, such as, geez, your boobs look good in that. See, now it's gross. And if someone is saying that to you, under no circumstances should you have to put up with it. I don't care if your boobs do look good in a certain top. I'm not going to make a thing out of that. And don't go looking. It's weird and creepy. There isn't a level of okay that you can sort of go, oh, I'm going to do that. It's never going to be okay. You can spin it 50 ways from Sunday. You can say it's a compliment. You can say that you were just doing something nice. Typically when an old guy that's saying that and then your boss, you kind of get a bit creeped out. Look, I'm sure that this happens in a lot of workplaces, but these are particularly vulnerable places where you can be blackballed out of it for good. And these people never get to work in this town ever again if they don't do this. One female policy advisor said that there was a culture of women being assigned organisational roles while men dealt with the policy work. Male staffers would constantly take credit for the work of women advisors. Even as a policy advisor, MPs would ask me to do a coffee run when they would never have asked a male policy advisor to do so. She described a pay gap between the male and female staffers. And that's outrageous. If there is a policy of doing this where, you're a female, you go do the coffee run and you stay back and do all the extra work. We're just going to brainstorm some ideas and you fill in the details and we're going to take all the credit. That's terrible. Only 57% of women surveyed said they felt safe working in Parliament at night compared to 80% of men. That's appalling. That's got to change. Offices are a hot spot for bullying. Some MPs and ministers in the offices in the Parliament described as well-known hotspots of bullying, with a revolving door of staffers. The report says people leave the offices traumatised and nothing changes. Staff described the leadership lottery where the culture of the office was dependent on the particular minister. Now, listen to this.
And I say quite honestly and very sincerely to anyone out there, my door is always open and always has been. I believe that you set the example yourself for what you stand for and how you behave. And everybody needs to start doing that. For those particular people that may be reading that report today, you know who you are. And my very strong advice to you is that you do not belong in the Parliament of New South Wales. I ask you to think very long and hard about this. And I ask you to make sure that if this is you that is mentioned, get the help that you need and please leave the New South Wales Parliament.
Now, this is terrible on so many levels. They got a woman to do this. So they got a woman to speak about the sexual abuse of men in this workplace. Right. And then not only did they trot this woman out, they were like, they're not going to take her seriously because she's not part of the boys' club. No. They needed the boys' club to be disbanded from the boys' club. You needed the men to stand there and then say, no, this isn't going on. That's not what happens here. They don't treat it like that. Some MPs just don't have any boundaries, and that's part of my issue. They put a woman out there to do this whole I don't believe in sexual harassment. No, you needed the New South Wales MPs, the men that are actually committing that crime, to come out and go, no, I thoroughly don't think this is a code of conduct that we should live by. This is another Julie Bishop moment where they put these women out there to defend the indefensible. No, this woman can say that her door is open to any and all staff members that are being sexually harassed. But here's the thing, it shouldn't be her responsibility to fix this. She's not part of the boys' club. She didn't do any of this stuff. I don't see how they put this woman out there to be the fodder moment for the LNP. I'm disgusted at how they handle this stuff. You know what really should have happened? The leader, Dominic Perrott, should have came out, gave a bold statement, stood with the other members of that boys' club in the New South Wales Parliament and said, we're not going to tolerate this. And there should have been an absolutely clear message sent to those staffers. If you're having an issue and you know it's an issue, it should have been put right to the top. But as per usual, they do this kind of thing and it gets nowhere. So we're still going to have this women issue of women in their 20s being exploited because that's what they're hiring. They're hiring these young, impressionable women who want to give it a good go in Parliament. And now there's 57% of them who said they didn't feel safe. My God, at some point, you have to be able to go and feel safe at your workplace. You've got to be able to say, if I'm going to stick around for that evening, I should be totally safe doing that. Not only should I be safe, but I should be able to talk to another colleague if I'm not, male or female. They trotted her out to fill that narrative when it should have been there. I reckon that there would be people that are known for doing this, and they should have been named and shamed. Because nothing gets better unless you're naming these very predatory males that are doing it. And that's the thing. There should be an investigation, naming and shaming the predatory MPs that are hiring these young, impressionable women and taking advantage and stealing their work, and then making them do these crazy coffee runs and then taking the credit for everything that they're doing. There's a lot to unpack with doing that. And I think the really bad part about this is when they're talking about the trauma. The part that I've highlighted there is the talking about the trauma of their workplace. Like, this is like nothing else. New South Wales has the same problem that the federal LNP do with women. Now, both sides of politics probably have this going on, but I think it's more hyperventilated because the LNP are just that bit grubbier and a bit gross. And I couldn't imagine, like what that woman was saying before, where a male staffer, you're walking into work, and a male staffer, you can hear him commenting on how the women's boobs are scored. Are you serious? Like, that's gross. Look, you don't need some little old fat lady telling you how they're supposed to behave. You need the big boys club to come out and go, no, we're not going to hire these young 20 impressionable-year-old women to take advantage of them anymore. We're going to hire purely on the best interests of the nation. That's the crazy part about this, is that these women are probably very intelligent and know their stuff. And that's why they're using them to take the policy from them, make them do the coffee runs, and then they take all the credit. And if you're in your 20s, you can't speak up about your boss taking all the credit for this. There's no way that you can go, hey, that was my idea. That thing that they're running around telling people about, that was mine. It's sad. One staff member said that they were in tears most days and told that they would get used to it. Nah, there's never, ever a good moment for that. But that deals with that issue. But we're not done yet with New South Wales. New South Wales, I think, is going to be a big contention point And I think there's going to be a lot stirred up with New South Wales, not just because they're heading into an election period, but because I think they've got genuine problems. Look, I think federally and on a state level, the LNP have got a lot of cleaning up to do. And if it's on Labor's side, do it too. Do it now. Because once the scope goes off the LNP, we are going to be looking into all of you. Do not think for a minute that this is going to be something that just one side we believe is doing it. There are creepy dudes on every side at times that will do something that you can't run away from. And I want that to be known. It's gross. So what happens with corruption in New South Wales? Now, okay. So former New South Wales Liberal minister suspended from Parliament after corruption finding. The former New South Wales Liberal minister, Jones Sidodoni, has lashed out an independent corruption watchdog because this is what they did when Gladys Berejiklian was found to act corrupt. They were like, no, we're not going to go with we did something wrong. We're going to attack the body rather than actually owning what you did. The government, along with the opposition on Tuesday, voted to suspend Sidoti from the Legislative Assembly after he refused to resign following the corruption findings. The Independent Commission Against Corruption last month found Sidoti had engaged in corrupt conduct to the benefit of his family and property interests in Sydney's inner west between late 2013 and early 2017. Sidodoni became emotional during the speech to the lower house during the suspension motion, criticising ICAC because, of course, you do. Whenever you get caught by the cop, you're like, oh, you're all bad people. Or I'm not saying that bad people aren't in amongst this sort of stuff. I'm saying that when you do something wrong, you need someone else to blame, which he described as an out-of-control Frankenstein monster, and urged Labor leader Chris Minns to reform the agency if he wins government next year. Now, if he's reaching across the aisle and then going, no, you fix this, that means that his own party has found subsequently that he acted corruptly. And that the independent body did too. So his own government, this is your own goal here. Your own side is like, the independent body found you did something wrong. We're finding that you did something wrong. Oh, and by the way, the crossbench does as well, and so does Labor. So at what point do you have to go, no, it's the system. It doesn't add up. But the Frankenstein monster is out of control. Nobody is safe. Reform from the beast before it takes a bite out of you, he said. The ICAC found Sidodoni persistently emailed and telephoned and sought meetings with councillors in the lead up to every council meeting at which relevant planning matters were to be discussed. Now, this is why you do not do that, because these are meetings where there are votes taking place, and you're not supposed to sway the pool. It's supposed to be looked at on merit. So you're not supposed to call up your good buddy that's either on your governmental side or on the opposition, because they are friends. There's no question to me that they are friends from both sides of government. And what's not supposed to happen is you're supposed to call them up before the meeting takes place. Now, have a listen to how he put it, which is even worse. It sounds worse when you hear him say it.
It's essential resources.
And then when you know that he's saying something wrong, he tries to correct it there. You see it in his face. He knows he's a goner. And when his own
Liberal
side
Minister
says
John
it.
Sidoti has been barred from state parliament in a motion passed by his former colleagues this afternoon. Mr Sidoti will remain the member for Drummoyne as he refuses to resign despite serious corruption findings made against him last year. In his final words before the suspension ruling, he took aim at the corruption watchdog.
This Frankenstein monster is out of control and nobody is safe. Reform the beast before it takes a bite out of you too.
He is the second former government minister to be kicked out of the precinct following the suspension of Gareth Ward last month. It's been a tumultuous time for the Premier, who's lost 2 ministers last week, including his deputy Liberal leader. This morning, Treasurer Matt Keane was elected unopposed to take up the position.
Now, I will say this. They didn't just... the LNP didn't just look at the findings and ignore it, which is typically how these things are handled. Like, there were many times Scott Morrison knew something was wrong and didn't do anything. I have to hand Dominic Perrott this one iota of niceness. He did what he was supposed to do. And in doing that, I thank Dominic, but I think that his party is still a shit show. Also directed the councillors' attendance at the meeting, berated them for non-attendance, and implied their positions are on Canada Bay Council would be threatened if they did not advance the positions that he wanted. That's corruption. When the councillors refused to comply, Sidoti withdrew his endorsement for those of them who were contesting the 2017 council election. You cannot do this stuff. He categorised his behaviour as standing for the local MPs advocating on behalf of the community and local business. No, it isn't. The borough is so low now that the robust advocacy, which we do every day, is labelled as serious corruption. No, and that's typical of the Conservative language. What? I'm just doing what everyone's doing, so yeah. Look, if you've got the goods of anyone else doing this, sure, front it up. ICAC will look into it, and I'm certain that there will be enough of you to drop like flies. And a man's scorn generally does blow a pretty big whistle, like women. But I believe that this is going to be the moment for him where he is going to scream to the rooftops, because his own side has thrown him under the bus. Rightfully so that they did, but now he's a Liberal scorned. Now he's going to be talking. He eliminated the years it took to the corruption watchdog to finalise its investigation, saying it impacted his chance of gaining pre-selection in the Liberal seat of Drummoyne. I know I cannot contest my seat as a Liberal. ICAC has robbed me of my dignity and career and reputation, my future prospects. This is a disproportionate result. No, that's the thing. This isn't disproportionate. This is exactly what that body was intending to do. And the very fact that you thought that you could do what other ones did, and I'm looking at you, independents of New South Wales that were former Liberals, that just sort of flicked the switch when your own party knew that you did something wrong and then you became independents. That's what's wrong with independents, is because there is this purview looking into it that if they're doing something wrong, they don't need to be part of the big party anymore. The big party that got them their name brand. And it's bad. ICAC created an atmosphere where local MPs were too scared to advocate. They'll be too scared to upset an incompetent councillor. No, they did exactly what they were supposed to. They dogged you in. There was a result of that, and now you're in trouble. The inquiry heard evidence of one incident in 2016 where Sidoti encountered a Liberal councillor, Mirajana Sesta, while exercising on the Bay Run, and threatened her position on council if she did not adopt his position on the Block in 5 dock. Now, there is, Friendly Geordies talks about this a lot. Now, Jordan regularly talks about that. developers' interests in New South Wales and how they've managed to gain so much. So it's good that that's finally been dealt with. The inquiry heard evidence of one incident in which Sidoni encountered. Oh no, hold on. The RCAC is now seeking advance advice from the Director of Public Prosecutions, the DPP, on whether criminal prosecution should be commenced against Sidoni. Now, here's the interesting part. If they go to prosecute him with the DPP's advice and do that, he's going to squeal. So I would be, if I was ever a Liberal right now, they're probably already getting the shredders ready for this one. This one is going to be one for the ages to watch, because corruption, no matter which side, someone screams fire and they're all running for the hills. This guy has the goods. He knows stuff. And I'm not surprised. Instead, he instructed his lawyers to lodge an application to the Supreme Court to clear his name. That never goes well. I've never ever seen somebody dispute it like that and it end with, oh no, you're good, and pat him on the back. It never goes that way. But don't take my word for it. Take theirs. So, still staying on New South Wales, I need to talk about John Barilaro. So he was supposed to face ICAC. What ended up happening was really funny on so many levels. He kept saying, I'm going to rock up. I'm really going to come. And Friendly Geordies caught this amazing part. I need to make sure you get to see what Jordan did. Now, if you don't know, John Barilaro has made a lot of ruffled Friendly Geordies feathers by doing a lot of dodgy things like the fixated persons unit on his producer and so many more things. So if you haven't checked out Friendly Geordies, go to his YouTube channel or Facebook page or wherever else you find a Friendly Geordie airing, and you will see that play out. So here's where it gets super interesting when Friendly Geordies caught this little moment of John Barilaro.
What did I do? I applied for a job, a trade job, and a process can be detailed if given the opportunity to go to a hearing, but the upper house won't call me to the hearing because they don't want to hear the truth. So give me the opportunity in a hearing in real life time, live, for everybody to get the same information at the same time, and we can go through this process. You know, just because there's been a couple of coincidences in relation to when cabinet submissions went up or whatever, the time.
I love his wording of this. It's just coincidental, I swear. There was nothing bad about this. The weirdness of John Barilaro just going, no, this is purely coincidental. I swear to God, I did not do what they say I did. But it gets funnier. This is like they make their own comedy. Bruz, this is gold.
Versus it doesn't equal a conspiracy. And what I'm really disgusted in is that I'm not being given that opportunity to do so.
Yep. So this was like, I don't know, the icing on the cake for Friendly Geordies, because I tell you what, if he was ever vindicated, this is it. If this was ever the moment Friendly Geordies could sing to the mountaintops, no, we got him, this is it. This is his shining light on the hill moment. And I got to hand it to Jordan. He's done an extraordinary job with this. I want to go into an article I found, and it's weird that MSN covered it because they typically don't. Not like this. This one's quite funny when you see how MSN covered this particular thing. Okay, John Barilaro pulls out of the parliamentary inquiry into the US trade job. Former Deputy Premier John Barilaro pulled out of today's parliamentary inquiry citing ill health. The committee member and Greens MP Kate Fayenham, I butchered that, has confirmed the development to the ABC. The Upper House inquiry has been investigating Mr. Barilaro's appointment to the Senior Trade Investment Commissioner to the Americans, the appointment to New York. He was scheduled to give evidence on his second day of evidence today, but after affronting the inquiry on Monday, Mr. Barilaro was due to face questions about what his girlfriend Jennifer Lugston knew about the lucrative US trade job he was awarded earlier this year. Ms. Lugston worked for the Investment New South Wales body responsible for hiring people overseas trade role. Of course his girlfriend was in charge of this kind of thing. That's like leaving a fox in control of the hen house. What could possibly go wrong? I don't know, John, but it's funny as fuck to watch you run away from this shit. You were warned. This wasn't as if this popped up out of nowhere. You knew that this stung to high heaven. Then you resigned and you pretended to be the victim. Oh, and because you couldn't get hold of friendly Geordies, you sued Google and you got a bit of a payout. You know, here's the deal though. Google paid you money because they didn't want to deal with how ridiculous you were. They didn't want to spend a lawyer or anything like that on you being an idiot. So they were like, hey, it's easier to settle it, get you out of the way, done. This would have been like a drop in the water to them. Okay, here on Monday, Mr. Barilaro expressed frustration about facing questions on his personal life. In other words, they asked him, look, were you with that woman at the time that you got this appointment? And he was. You cannot have your girlfriend set up this lucrative job for you. I'm looking at you, Mr. Barnaby Joyce, where you set up a lucrative job for your girlfriend, Vicky Campion. You do this all the time and you think nobody noticed. Guess what, Sonny old Jim? We noticed. It's not funny. What you did here isn't funny. There's no winning out of doing this. And now that there's an ICAC inquiry, you want to blame the body that's getting you. Mr. Sidodoni did the same thing. He's blaming the body. Gladys Berejiklian did the same thing. They even had like this vigil for her at the front of her office, her little stand group that was out there holding candles as if, you know, she's going to be terribly missed. Gladys Berejiklian did her own little, I don't want to know about that level of corruption. So don't turn around and tell me that they don't have a problem here. They have a really, really big problem. I get it, Gladys was lonely and she was doing whatever her piece wanted, her little side piece. And that's the thing, they're all doing it, whether it's John Barilaro, whether it's Barnaby Joyce talking about how he's, you know, gotten Vicky Campion all amounts of jobs. This has to stop and there needs to be laws put into place from what exactly John Barilaro and Gladys Berejiklian and Barnaby Joyce did. This is illegal. You cannot just go, hey, I've got a buddy, totally not qualified for the job. Oh, and drop the person who is qualified for the job. That's what happened here. And this totally vindicates everything Friendly Geordie said. But I'm not done on that side note. Because I think seeing that he later pulled out of this inquiry is the most devastating part of this. He didn't even he was like, no, I so want to answer questions in 2017. Because do you know what he thought? He thought I can skate through this. He thought like every parliamentarian, deny. And I don't care which side of politics you're on. He thought he could do with the deny right up until that 11th hour. None of that is going to work. Not this time. So what ended up happening was even worse as a result. He's now ruined his career and anyone else now attached to him. And there have been resignations around John Barilaro and this appointment. So next one I want to touch is the Qantas CEO stuff. What have they been asked to do, and why is it so ridiculous? So the Qantas CEO issue is going to come up a fair bit. Qantas is the quintessential aviation company that was once owned by the government. Now, subsequently, it was sold and now a private entity. Now, there's Alan Joyce who runs Qantas. Now, when he received a lot of PPE money as a result of that, he laid off a lot of staff, which you weren't supposed to do. He laid off 2,000 staff. But then something really shocking happened. The aviation industry rebooted, and there was no one to be baggage handlers. So what do you think his solution was? Not rehire the baggage handlers that he subsequently fired. No. He went on to ask over 100 CEOs to be baggage handlers, because that's not inappropriate at all. People who have never done it, to scan this luggage and to be putting it onto that aircraft. People that have no experience in this whatsoever. So they called on their upper management executives to roll up their sleeves and work it as a baggage handler under a 3-month contingency program to battle the staff shortages and flight disruption. Can I truly say that the executive branch of Qantas shouldn't even have their jobs? Because I'm sure that the people on this board were fully on board to do what they did. And I'm sure that the CEO or the board of whoever, of however this played out, played a role in these people being fired. Now they're all going to cry, but I'm not equipped to do it. Well, maybe don't fire the people who were. Notably, it comes after Qantas outsourced 2,000 of its own in-house grounded handlers last year in a decision that the federal court later ruled was done in partial violation of the Fair Work Act. Subsequently rejected Qantas' application to appeal. The airline filed a second appeal and the case is ongoing. It also comes as baggage handlers at a third-party service, DNATA, now contracted to complete Qantas ground services, prepare to vote on a strike amid ongoing disputes over pay and working conditions with management. See, when you burn the house down, no one's there to put it out. You idiots! Why would you took an icon, man, and you turned it into some shit show private entity that has absolutely no business doing this stuff. But I digress. According to the report in the Australian, up to 100 senior management at Qantas are now being asked to volunteer to support as ground staff, with duties including scanning and sorting passenger baggage. You know that they're trained to do this stuff, right? You can't just rock up and then go, no, I know exactly what I'm looking for. I know which particular drug or contraband I'm supposed to be looking for on that scanner. Like, this could really turn dangerous if you've got some CEO who hasn't been trained properly to do this and someone gets something onto the plane that they're not supposed to have. Hey, dummies, there's a reason you're security. You're the line between me getting on that plane and living and not. What's wrong with you? During your time at the contingency program, you'll be an ebbed resource within the ground handling partners. Chief Operating Officer Colin Hughes said in an internal note to staff about the program. This means you'll receive a roster to be scheduled to operate and supervise and manage at the live operations ground handling partners. No, this is insane. For one, why do they have a CEO branch, but yet it's crumbling before our very eyes? Qantas, you've monumentally stuffed this up. You are now what we call debunked as an icon. I don't know what happened here. You could have been anyone, and this is who you chose to be. Okay, now that that's done, I want to talk about Karen Andrews. I know I've gone a little bit over tonight, but that's because my sound cut out. Okay, Karen Andrews, what did she say that definitely got people a little bit upset? And why? Because she says things that just are
Morning.
patently
You said
incorrect.
Australia's relationship with China is arguably even worse under the new Labor government than it was under the coalition. By what measure do you base that assertion?
Well, I think that it is open to various interpretations about what the relationship is between.
First wording. I said something stupid, so I need to say that it can be interpreted different ways. No, it's pretty clear what you said. You said it was worse under Labor. You can't interpret that statement any differently. If you're going to jump the horse and then go, no, I'm going to say this as a firm, solid yes, it's worse under Labor, you can't then later go on to say, hey, it's subject to interpretation. That's weird. Backtrack instant.
Between Australia and China. And I think that it's fair to say that when you look at it, it's pretty clear that the relationship is really not a lot better than it was over the last few months.
Now, another backpedal. It's not much better underneath this government. That doesn't mean that it's worse, Karen Andrews. What is wrong with you? I think it was a good thing that you got called on this instantly. This is what your government does. It just says, oh no, we did a terrible job, but you're doing it worse. Yeah, okay, how? It's weird. It's weird. Don't do this.
Months in particular, probably 12, 18 months, there's been not a lot of change. So that was the point that I was making.
Yeah, the 12 to 18 months. Who was in government then? Yeah, I think that's a perfect freeze frame. I really stuffed this one up. It's a weird thing that she did, and I don't know why she did it. But again, this is what happens when you have these sorts of people that just say things and don't actually know what they said. All right, now, I don't know if you're caught up on the Jacinta Price referendum stance. She is going for a no vote. She is part of the First Nations people, but it's more important of what her track record is. She is a Liberal Conservative that is saying all the wrong things and hitting all the wrong notes. Mike Carlton has been good enough to grab this screen grab of what she went on to say. Now, take a listen to this, and I guarantee you it's not great. This is who she's more in love with than her First Nations people. And part of our First Nations people.
And of course, Lachlan Murdoch, whose family have provided a beacon of light in a sea of woke darkness.
Yeah, no, I would rather be woke. That means intelligent enough to see that there's a problem, wanting to fix something in that hole that you created. Oh, and we're not going to give cover to Rupert Murdoch like she just did. What a stupid... You put yourself right there. I love Rupert Murdoch and James Murdoch. Yeah, this isn't going to go well for you from this point on if you're going to go with a no vote. We're going to look at your record for what it is.
Via the necessary media platforms that deliver genuine, common sense and fact-driven news reporting for our benefit. And of course, Lachlan...
But she didn't stop there. Then she went on and had a dispute with a journalist. And because he has a different opinion to hers, she accused him of yelling and screaming. As a result, even Bevan Shields, who runs The Australian, heard this recording, can subsequently come out and then say, no, it didn't happen the way Jacinta said it did. She later retracts this statement, and then you still got people within the Murdoch empire trying to play cover girl for Jacinta's very inappropriate comments about another journalist. Now, this is what ended up happening. as a result of that explosive text. Explosive text emerged amid nasty Jacinta Price Peter Fitzsimmons feud. Now listen to this. It doesn't look good for her at all. She's later retracted everything, but the damage is done. She damaged a man's credibility because she disagreed with him, and that's not how you do things at all. He should sue her. Oh, nope. I've accidentally ruined it. Okay, so I don't know how to go back. So the full explosive text between Senator Jacinta Price and the columnist Peter Fitzsimmons have revealed after the pair became engaged in a nasty feud following a recent phone interview. Senator Price, who is an Indigenous woman, claimed that she felt bullied by Peter Fitzsimmons during the interview and alleged he accused her of giving a racist voice. Now, in a deleted post, the Country Liberal Party senator took to Facebook on Sunday evening after the interview Thursday was published, claiming Peter Fitzsimmons was very bloody aggressive. Now, she's had to later retract all of this. Now, that's on the back of her saying the Murdochs are great people. There's no way you can spin this. But if you know anything, there's another Liberal to jump that bandwagon. What this later turned into was Warren Mundine putting his nose trying to stand for Jacinta. He's an Indigenous man, but he's also a Liberal Conservative who has been caught out many times telling a porcupine or two. He thought he would do it on Twitter and put everyone on blast, later having to be shown that this was wrong. But they never ever concede. She needs to apologise and he needs to apologise because he backed this 110% knowing damn well that she was lying. Fitzsimmons, Sydney Morning Herald columnist and husband to Lisa Wilkinson, which I did not know, denied her claim, which described the complete and utter nonsense. He told The Australian it was a friendly interview with a nice text exchange. It's all in conclusion. Now, here's that subsequent text. Have a look. You've told The Australian we shouted at each other. Every word is recorded, and as I advised you, happy to hand it over to the Fairfax lawyers. Beyond which your text to me and above shows our friendly exchange. Senator, I urge you to withdraw these defamatory accusations as you know it's nonsense. We did yell at each other, she went on to say. I'd like a copy of the interview and thank you. You did accuse me of empowering racists. I don't know if that happened, but if the shoe fits, Jacinta, if the shoe damn well fits, you just called Murdochs the greatest people on earth. Do you know what they've been known to do to the First Nations people? Yeah, I don't even want to go there. This was a bad move. Senator, you must forget I recorded the entire interview. Not a single word raised on either side, let alone shouting. This is a serious matter, Senator. You have defamed me. I will advise you to immediately withdraw your accusations. Have you said this on Sky? Tape with lawyers. Okay. I didn't say shouting. I recall I had to yell, as did my chief of staff who was present while you were on speaker. I have a witness at my end as well, but it doesn't matter. It's all recorded, Senator. The Australian is saying that you said I yelled at you and was aggressive and rude. You know that is simply not true, and I invite you to withdraw it quickly. I repeat, every word is recorded as you advised. And then she does something that everyone does when busted. Please stop bullying me. I don't ever want to communicate with you again. Are you freaking kidding me? Are you freaking kidding me? This was not going to go away. Let's talk about why that wasn't going to go away, Senator Price. Because you have a big bully platform. I don't know, like a politician's platform. Something Peter Fitzsimmons doesn't have the luxury of. I will grant you this. Lisa Wilkinson, his wife, has a massive audience that she can disseminate this to. But Peter Fitzsimmons doesn't. And what you later went on to do is purely slanderous. Look, if you want to be stupid on this whole referendum thing, be my guest. You want to sell out the Aboriginal voice? Be my guest. But do not do it in such a disingenuous way where you lie. And I suggest that you do get in contact with one of your lawyers before this matter turns into the shit show worse than what it already is. This isn't going to go away, and nor should it. Okay. So now that she's withdrawn it, look at this, Bevan Shields. Now, he's no lefty. You know Bevan Shields is like fully 110% in, but couldn't back Jacinta on this one. I've listened to the audio, full interview between Peter Fitzsimmons and Senator Price. There was no yelling, no shouting from either participant. This was an interesting interview in which the Senator's positions and views were tested. The Australian really needs to move on. It's worth noting Peter provided Senator Price with a transcript of what proposed to publish in his column, and she approved it. She also deleted her initial Facebook post about that interview. That's a really important factor. Bevan Shields doesn't do retractions just over nothing. In other words, he could see the writing on the wall. He could see that they could lose a bucket load of money if they let Senator Price run with that rhetoric. This is like the level of Trump trying to convince people that the election was stolen. That's what she did. She made an outrageous claim that could have ruined that man's career. I don't know why she did it. I think that she felt very challenged during that interview. And I think hearing that interview, I'm going to play it when it becomes readily available. We're going to see if that does become part of a court proceedings. That'll be interesting. So I think it's vindicated him. I don't think this has gone well for her at all. But I want to touch on one last story. This is a good news story, and I thought we would talk about it. Okay, so here we go. Dean Andrews, we're opening a second dedicated elective surgery centre in Victoria. So those who get care can need it. The Blackburn Public Surgical Centre will have 2 new operating theatres. We'll have to put it up and have it running by October. Okay, what say you, Melburnians? Because I've seen your weird little protests out the front of a children's hospital, you weirdos. You weird freaks that thought it was a great idea, you anti-vaxxer weirdos that stood out the front of an immune-compromised area, screaming with megaphones, attacking this government. There's a man on a mission. You can either back him or don't. But I think a man fixing a health industry deserves a re-election campaign. But we will see how it divvies itself out as a result. I think that this will be an interesting moment for everyone to see how these election cycles turn out in 2023. We have New South Wales and Victoria up for elections. The New South Wales one is going to be pretty dicey. And we know the LNP are going to get obliterated in Victoria. Should do anyway. Because the opposition leader is no good. But I want to thank everyone who was able to join me tonight tips. And I want to thank the people who gave me tips. Oh, and I want to thank Friendly Geordies for his information tip for me to go live tonight. Any and all information shared on this platform, ask me for it. It is readily available. Have a wonderful evening, and I will see you 6 p.m. next Sunday. Have fun.